What happens when you build an entire state's energy supply on a single pipeline? And then the company that feeds that pipeline announces it's shutting down? You get panic, you get price spikes, you get a governor scrambling to explain how she let this happen. I'm Melissa Hayes, and this is the story Oregon's leadership doesn't want you to hear. But before we dive in, hit that like button, subscribe, drop a comment below. This story affects millions of Americans, and the mainstream media is barely covering it. Help us get the truth out there. Let's go back to March 2023. That's when Phillips 66, one of America's largest oil companies, announced something huge. They were planning a $3 billion divestment from West Coast refining operations. $3 billion. Industry analysts immediately sounded the alarm. They said, if Phillips closes Ferndale, Oregon loses its lifeline. Oregon lawmakers called it fear-mongering. They said the industry was crying wolf. They said the market would adapt. But here's what they didn't tell you. Oregon has 0 oil refineries. Not one. Not a single barrel of gasoline is refined inside Oregon's borders. Instead, Oregon depends on 5 refineries in Washington state. 90% of Oregon's fuel comes from those 5 facilities, and it all travels through one pipeline. One. The Olympic Pipeline. 400 miles of steel pipe connecting Washington's refineries to Oregon's gas stations. When experts warned that losing even one refinery would be catastrophic, Governor Tina Kotek's administration dismissed it. They pointed to Oregon's climate goals. They pointed to the transition to electric vehicles. They said fossil fuel infrastructure was yesterday's problem. They were wrong. Then, in October 2025, the first domino fell. California, facing its own energy crisis, began shutting down refineries under Governor Gavin Newsom's climate mandate. Phillips 66 closed its Los Angeles refinery. Valero announced the closure of its Benicia facility. Together, those 2 refineries represented nearly 20% of California's refining capacity. Gone. Overnight, California became a net importer. And where do you think they turned for fuel? Washington state. The same 5 refineries Oregon depends on. Suddenly, Oregon wasn't just competing with local demand. It was competing with the entire West Coast. Prices started climbing. In early November 2025, Oregon's average gas price was $3.22 a gallon. By mid-November, it hit $3.58. Then, on November 14, 2025, disaster struck. The Olympic Pipeline sprang a leak in its distribution system near Seattle. The entire pipeline shut down. No gas, no diesel, nothing. For 2 weeks, Oregon held its breath. Fuel reserves, already critically low, began to evaporate. Oregon maintains only 10 to 15 days of fuel storage. That's half the national average. Let that sink in. Half. By November 24th, Governor Kotek had no choice. She declared a statewide fuel emergency under executive order. Truckers were given waivers to drive longer hours. Fuel tankers were exempt from environmental regulations. The state was in full crisis mode. And the government's solution? Truck it in. 42,000 barrels per day were moving through that pipeline. You know how many trucks it takes to replace that? Hundreds. The cost was staggering. Prices jumped by 23 cents per gallon in Portland alone. In rural areas like Klamath Falls, drivers were paying $3.91 by the end of November. The pipeline came back online on November 28th, but the damage was done. Here's the irony that should make your blood boil. Oregon spent years pushing climate policy. They wanted cleaner air, fewer emissions, a greener future, noble goals. But in doing so, they made themselves more dependent on fossil fuels, not less. How? Because when Washington refineries can't meet demand, Oregon has only one backup plan: import fuel from Asia. That's right. To avoid drilling in America, Oregon would ship crude oil across the Pacific Ocean, a journey that takes 30 to 50 days, a journey that adds a $40 per barrel premium to the cost of fuel. This isn't about politics. This is about math. You can't replace a 400-mile pipeline with good intentions. You can't fuel 18-wheelers with solar panels. You can't keep grocery stores stocked when diesel hits $5 a gallon. And yet, Oregon's leadership acted surprised. They acted like this was unpredictable, but it wasn't. Phillips 66 told them this would happen. Industry groups told them this would happen. Republican lawmakers told them this would happen, and they were ignored. Let me tell you about Tom Rivera. Tom owns a small trucking company in Eugene. He's been in business for 22 years. He hauls lumber, produce, and construction materials across Oregon and into Northern California. His company employs 14 drivers. On November 15, 2025, the day after the pipeline shut down, Tom got a call from his fuel supplier. Diesel prices were going up, not by a few cents, by 34 cents per gallon, overnight. Tom's fuel costs jumped from $12,000 a week to $16,000 a week, $4,000, gone. Tom couldn't pass that cost to his customers. His contracts were locked in, so he absorbed it. For 2 weeks, Tom's company lost money on every single delivery. By the time the pipeline reopened, he was down over $30,000. He had to let go of 2 drivers, 2 families, 2 mortgages, 2 kids' college funds. And here's the kicker. Tom called Governor Kotek's office. He called the Oregon Department of Energy. He called his state senator. You know what they told him? We're monitoring the situation. Monitoring. Tom wasn't asking for a handout. He was asking for answers. He wanted to know why Oregon had no backup plan. He wanted to know why the state was so vulnerable. He never got a response. So where are we now? It's January 2026. The pipeline is running again. But the threat hasn't gone away. In fact, it's worse. Because Phillips 66 just confirmed what everyone feared. They're moving forward with plans to close the Ferndale refinery. That's one of the 5 refineries Oregon depends on. When it closes, Oregon loses access to 20% of its fuel supply. Governor Kotek's response? She formed a task force. A task force, not a plan, not emergency infrastructure, not new storage facilities. A task force. Meanwhile, gas prices are sitting at $3.39 per gallon statewide. That's 57 cents higher than the national average of $2.82s. And it's only going to get worse because Oregon's business climate is collapsing. A 2025 survey by Oregon Business and Industry found that 41% of business owners are considering closing, selling, or moving their operations. 41%. Let that sink in. Nearly half of Oregon's businesses are looking for the exit. And can you blame them? Tektronix, a tech giant that called Oregon home for decades, relocated to Texas. Dutch Bros, founded in Grants Pass, Oregon, moved its headquarters to Arizona. These aren't small mom-and-pop shops. These are iconic Oregon brands, and they're fleeing because Oregon's government chose ideology over infrastructure. They chose optics over outcomes. And now, the working class is paying the price. Here's the bottom line. Oregon was warned. They were warned that closing refineries in California would create competition. They were warned that depending on one pipeline was a disaster waiting to happen. They were warned that low fuel reserves would lead to price shocks. And they ignored every single warning. Now, families like Tom Rivera's are suffering. Now, gas prices are 57 cents above the national average. Now, Oregon is one pipeline leak away from another statewide emergency. And Governor Kotek wants you to believe this was unavoidable. It wasn't. This was a choice to prioritize long-term climate goals over immediate energy security, a choice to ignore industry experts and double down on policy, a choice that has left Oregon more vulnerable, more expensive, and more dependent than ever before. So here's my question for you. Do you think Governor Kotek should be held accountable for this crisis? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you found this video valuable, share it. Send it to a friend in Oregon. Send it to someone who's tired of paying $4 a gallon, because the more people who know the truth, the harder it is for politicians to hide from it. I'm Melissa Hayes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.